Don't understand marriage historically as simply a romantic partnership or your number one person. No. We understand marriage historically, and it makes sense for society to be concerned about marriage because it is connected to procreation and child rearing in this very important way. So that's the basic understanding of marriage. We now have to give it a descriptive label, the conjugal understanding of marriage, the idea of marriage as a conjugal partnership, to distinguish it from this new idea that is, of course, itself the fruit of the sexual revolution that came out of the very influential work of people like Margaret Sanger and Alfred Kinsey and Hugh Hefner. We now need a label for that, and we call that the revisionist understanding of marriage. Now, you ask about comprehensiveness, and that's a very important point, and we develop it in trying to explain the historic conjugal understanding of marriage. On the conjugal understanding, what is united in marriage are two persons as whole beings, and that is not simply as minds or consciousnesses or centers of feeling or spirits, but as bodies as well. Marriage is a comprehensive union, unlike ordinary friendships, which are unions of hearts and minds. Unlike those, marriage, and what makes it distinctive and sets it apart, is that it's a bodily relationship as well. Marriage has historically been understood as consummated and actualized by acts that fulfill the behavioral conditions of procreation. And that's true whether or not the non-behavioral conditions of procreation happen to obtain. So it's a union of the whole person, comprehensive union. It is based on the understanding that persons are not simply minds or spirits residing in non-personal bodies, which they use as extrinsic instruments. No, the body is part of the personal reality of the human being, and therefore a true union of persons, a comprehensive union of persons, is bodily as well as emotional. Now, how can two persons become one? If we use the biblical language, how can it be that the man and woman cleave to one another and become one flesh? Is that just a metaphor? Is that just a kind of poetic way of expressing emotional closeness? No. There is one respect in which human beings genuinely become one in the bodily dimension of their being, and that is in reproductive types of actions. Human beings are separate entities, separate organisms for most of our activity and functioning. We digest our food, we walk as individuals. Digestion is an act, a function. It's performed by the individual. Locomotion is an act, a function performed by the individual human being. But notice that reproduction is different. The reproductive act is a single act, but it's not performed by human beings as individuals, but rather by human beings as mated pairs, as men and women, males and females. Those acts are not always fruitful. They don't always produce children. In order for them to be fruitful, not only do the behavioral conditions of procreation have to be fulfilled by the acting persons, but the non-behavioral conditions of procreation have to obtain. But our law has always understood that, and it's never treated infertility as a bar for marriage or as a ground for legal annulment. But it has treated non-consummation as giving a ground for a legal annulment, because a marriage isn't truly complete in the end unless and until it is consummated. So that shows the sense in which marriage is a comprehensive union, different not only in degree of intensity of emotional bond, but different in kind from companionship of any kind. The revisionist understanding of marriage, of course, can make no sense of any of these dimensions of our historic law and practice. It simply treats marriage as your number one person, as an especially intense emotional relationship, not distinctive or set apart in kind from other types of unions of hearts and minds. In fact, marriage is simply really, in the end, a union of hearts and minds and not of bodies, since obviously same-sex partners, although they can engage in acts that lead to orgasm and so forth, cannot become a single reproductive principle, cannot unite in the way that even infertile couples can unite in acts that fulfill the behavioral conditions of procreation. Now, Ken, if I can go on for just another minute,
Sure.
let me talk about some of the implications of that philosophically. And these are not, when I say philosophically, I don't mean they're unimportant. They're terribly important. It's important that we think this through philosophically in a rigorous way. But look at what we're left with if we abandon the idea of marriage as a conjugal partnership, as a comprehensive union, and embrace the idea of marriage, the revisionist idea of marriage, as sexual romantic companionship or domestic partnership, as your number one person, or as essentially an emotional and not a bodily communion. First, we cannot explain why marriage should be a sexual relationship at all. We can't explain why two people couldn't just as well consider the central integrating feature of their marriage to be playing tennis together or reading novels together or some other shared non-sexual interest or activity. And, of course, we can't explain why marriage should be the union of two and only two persons and not three or more in so-called polyamorous sexual partnerships, since not only can two persons, but three or even four or five persons can feel a close emotional bond and can even decide that they like to express their emotional feeling for each other in mutually agreeable sexual play. By the same token, there can be no ground of principle, lay aside sentiment or subjective preference, but no ground of actual principle for why marriages should be sexually closed rather than open, why there should be fidelity and not promiscuity. Nor can any account be given on the revisionist understanding of marriage as an emotional bond. No understanding of why marriage should involve a pledge of permanence as opposed to being a temporary partnership for a set number of years, or for as long as love lasts, or what have you. So you see that what dissolves once we abolish the norm of sexual complementarity are all the other norms that give marriage its distinctive structure and its unique suitability as the context for child rearing. But you must understand, and your listeners must understand, that this isn't just some conservative Christian scare tactics on my part. We now find the leading figures in the movement to redefine marriage coming completely out of the closet and expressing exactly the thoughts I just expressed, though affirming them. Mm-hmm. So, for example, there's an article that just appeared yesterday in the mainstream liberal online magazine called Slate, in which a New York writer, whose name is Keenan, says the following: "The definition of marriage is plastic. Just like heterosexual marriage is no better or worse than homosexual marriage, marriage between two consenting adults is not inherently more or less correct than marriage among 3 or 4 or 6 consenting adults. Though polygamists are a minority, freedom has no value unless it extends to even the smallest and most marginalized groups among us. So let's fight for marriage equality until it extends to every same-sex couple in the United States, and then let's keep fighting. We're not done yet." Now, unquote. Now, this is not a fringe argument. This is now a mainstream argument among those seeking to redefine marriage. One finds it in the work of NYU sociologist Judith Stacy, Arizona State scholar Elizabeth Brake, activists like Dan Savage, Michelangelo Signorilli, and I could go on and on. 300 LGBT, self-identified LGBT activists and allies have signed a statement called Beyond Same-Sex Marriage, in which they quite openly say that, yes, we need to now move beyond same-sex marriage to the legal recognition of multiple partner relationships. The logic of the thing requires that move. So we're not talking about some minor adjustment that simply enables more people to be eligible for marriage. We're talking about a fundamental transformation of the idea of marriage, really an abolition of marriage, to tell you the truth, because it would abolish all the norms. It would remove any ground of principle for any of the norms that have